Hello and welcome to another one of my thoughts videos. I would have liked to have wrapped up this whole theme of the world quarantining, and in this one I think I will. I think most people have had enough of it, and I'm quite glad to see that there are quite a number of medical people who have woken up, also lawyers and a number of people that are waking up. There's still a long way to go yet, but I think it's enough to leave it there. However, I would like to leave you with some sort of positive and encouraging note, considering the background of the whole study of these things throughout the last 150 years, and the developments that we have should be able to give us a little bit of a positive note to all of this. And I'll leave it after this video, I think, unless something really new comes up, and we'll keep going with other thoughts. Over the last couple months, I've been finding a few videos on YouTube about exosomes and fairly knowledgeable people at the top of their game. The president of the Exosome Society in the United States, another guy very high up there in some university, and some guy in Johns Hopkins University who's been working 20 years with these things. And all three of them, very top dogs, all insist that these particles that are causing the quarantines are exosomes in all respects. However, the old school particles that are causing the quarantine people are not willing, it seems to me, to entertain the possibility that they are exosomes, and the exosomologists are being very nice and not wanting to stand on the toes of the other crowd. So there's still a little bit of separation yet, but at least the exosomologists are saying they are exactly the same thing. They have every same mechanism, they have everything the same. So there's something positive for us. And what does that mean? Let's go back to our initial concepts that got me thinking. There's the replication concept, the life and death concept, and reason for being concept. Now, to just refresh our memory on that, we have they're dead, they are non-living, they have no mitochondria and a whole bunch of things, no decision making that they can make themselves because they're dead. They're like a FedEx package, an envelope with information in it. They come from where? Our own body. There is no place, unless they're artificially manipulated, that they can reproduce, either in a laboratory, and if it's from another animal, they are not compatible and have to be made compatible. A certain Dr. Mikovits, who's reasonably famous, look her up on the internet, she's probably been censored, but you might find something on her. She actually worked in the 90s to make Ebola from an animal, to then gave it the ability to be able to survive in the human body. So even Ebola was artificially made. She states it on camera and in her book and everything. She was one of the technicians that organized that. Now, so they are non-living, they've come from our bodies, and what is the reason? The purpose is that they serve our body. They do not attack our body. It's like the fire engine at the fire site where the house is burning down. Fire engines don't cause the fire, something else does. The fire engine is there to help the situation. These exosomes are also there to help the situation, and we're being lied to thinking that these particles are for our detriment. It's something else, and it always has been throughout history. Every single sickness that we have come across that are attributed to this has another cause. Now, if you do your own research and start to look at exosomes, be careful that you distinguish between two of them. An exosome they often call an EV, an extracellular vesicle. There are two kinds, and the quarantine particles say that the size of them is very different, or the aspect. The one kind is where the membrane of the cell bulges out, fills it with material, and then they bud off, and that makes an EV, extracellular vesicle. But there is another kind. There is a vesicle, a hole or a bubble within the cell that has a membrane, and it will take some time to make a more sophisticated extracellular vesicle with the RNA, DNA, whatever, proteins and all sorts of things. And if it's a coronus one, it'll have a spiky protein covering and stuff. And then that will migrate to the edge of the cell and spit them out. And that's what you're going to get. So they are the true exosomes. Those are extracellular vesicles. So be careful about that one. That's the smoke screen that they're going to always be using. The ones that I have seen speaking against exosomes, that's the first thing they say. They say they look nothing like it, because they show you pictures, electron microscope pictures, which aren't even that good because they're not as precise as the new methods they use, and they are showing you the wrong kind, not the exosomes. They're showing you the EVs, extracellular vesicles, which are something entirely different. Now, both these old particles in the exosomes can contain in it some DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, and they make it sound very scary, but it's just a portion of our DNA that is instructions. It's like pages from a manual. It may have some proteins necessary to do a little bit of replication in there, in the function that they do at the other end of things, and they may have an RNA, ribonucleic acid, which is only 1/2 of the deoxyribonucleic acid, the DNA. And they say there's a new kind, it's called a retro, and the sounds scary, but all it is the other side of the DNA. And the retro means it has to then assemble backwards, because normally with the DNA it goes from one end, and it has to, because of the molecular structure, assemble from one end and go towards the other end. To go back the opposite way, they must have a reverse polymerase, and they have to have an insertase, or what scriptase, one of those A's anyway, that is able to cut that and insert portions in blocks to then write it backwards. So that's a retro. It's nothing scary, it's just the other side of the DNA. In fact, an HIV particle has two sets of the same DNA or RNA, two copies of 20,000 nucleotides long, whereas the one that's causing this pandemic is one that is only 30,000 long, one RNA, and the reverse ones are just the opposite side of the strand. So what does this genetic material mean for us? It just means that these particles, these exosomes, have instructions like a few pages of an encyclopedia-sized instruction manual for our body to be able to go from one cell to another to communicate and to send instructions to other cells to do specific jobs. Some of them are cell specific and have a coating on them of different proteins that allows them into one cell and not another type. Others are a little bit more generic and can get into any cell, and others not quite so much. Remember, the breast cancer cells can produce exosomes that warn other cancer cells that there is chemotherapy chemicals around, so that they can become resistant to the chemotherapy when they encounter it. So the instructions are there to help us. Now the old school particles, bug particles, will say that there's this new kind that writes DNA or genetic material into our genome, into our DNA. Now this sounds really scary, and it's going to force our bodies to totally clap out and grow arms and legs or 3 eyes or something like that. But in actual fact, that's good news. They say that up to 20% of our genes are these supposed retro particles. And the thing is that this is information that the exosomes have figured out. Cells have figured out how to combat certain threats in our environment, realize that they're permanent and are here to stay, and so they write those instructions into our DNA for future reference and to be able to be passed down to our children, some of them anyway. Only DNA that gets into our sperm and ovum, all the other cells, of course, just die with that. Some of them get written into some cells and some not into others. The good thing is that some instructions on combating disease and threats to our body can be written into our DNA and passed on to further generations, and also shared with other people in the herd. So it's actually good news that these exosomes are able to do that. They also say, oh dear, it's going to be really terrible. What happens if you take a bat DNA instructions and insert that into our own DNA? What they don't realize is that the cell is extremely intelligent. If you have an encyclopedia with 50,000 books in it and you insert a page from a kid's book that you don't want there, well, the reader can just ignore that. There are certain genes that they say cause cancer, which is doubtful, but the body is quite capable of just not reading it and not acting on it because it's not an instruction it needs. Now, it is a well-known fact that our bodies are able to function with DNA that is not even ours. If you consider a transplant, an organ transplant, that entire organ, every cell in it, has different DNA to yours. And also there is a well-known situation where in the womb, when an ovum is fertilized and you have twins, one of the twins dies, some genetic material can stay and merge with the other, the live baby, and grow so that a person can actually have two sets, entire sets of DNA, and not get confused. As I say, our cells are extremely intelligent, and this is no problem for the cells to read or not read what it needs to in our DNA. So hopefully this is the last of the wrap-ups. These particles that they've used as our scam excuse are actually exosomes, product of our own body, part of our immune and communication system for our own benefit, and any extraneous material that gets written back into our DNA, whether it's from an animal or just normally, is no problem for our bodies. So those powers that be that want to use these things against us as biological warfare aren't going to be able to, because they're dealing with a product that our body is too intelligent for, and they can't manipulate bacteria, fungi and other things to do a specific job that they want. So rest calmly, we're okay, God is in control, and we're fine. So on with life, let's get over this scam.